This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Seven reported dead in Afghanistan amid airport chaos as Taliban's co-founder holds talks in Kabul. At least 75 kidnapped in Nigeria's Zamfara state. And catastrophic flooding hits the southern U.S. state of Tennessee, leaving 10 people dead. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. We begin the hour in Afghanistan, where 7 people have reportedly been killed amid chaos at the Kabul airport. Britain's Ministry of Defence says conditions on the ground remain extremely challenging. The UK continues its evacuation efforts from the airport as the US deadline for troop withdrawal nears. Nearly 4,000 people have been flown out by the UK so far, with a little over 1,000 making it to England. UK Defence Minister Ben Wallace says no one wanted 20 years of sacrifice to end this way. The Taliban co-founder Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar is in Kabul holding talks with politicians. Let's cross over to Kabul, where we have Zimarialai Abbasin, a journalist based in Afghanistan. Zimarialai, let's begin with the situation at the airport. How are things there now?
Hello, the situation in Kabul airport is far worse than it's being reported via different channels. Nobody knows how much casualties have occurred till this moment, but as I've been talking with several of those people who've been to the airport and they didn't find the way because of the fears and the shooting inside the Kabul airport by the US forces residing now in Kabul airport. One of those people who flee inside of the Kabul airport was just talking this afternoon with me. He told me that a guy got shot at head, and that's what made me frightened, and I escaped the area, and the situation is far worse than it's being reported. There is crash, there is crowd, there is shooting on those evacuees, and those people frightened with fears that what may happen to their future, and their families are still trying to flee the country. Most of the foreign mission and embassies in Kabul have no proper plan, particularly the US, and that's why they are criticized by different entities that why have been they doing this if all these things were happening. Why they didn't have a plan to evacuate all those people from Kabul airport. There are different kind of tactics to avoid people rush to the airport by US forces. For example, they are using tear gas, plastic bullets, and every kind of thing that they avoid, even direct shooting and air shootings in the air. So all options are available because there are fears, as we see. US Embassy has already alarmed its citizens to not travel till the second command. And because a potential ISIL or Daesh attack is on the way, and that's why it seems like US forces inside Kabul airport are afraid, and fury and fear together makes the situation far worse and unimaginable, because when you see those videos and footage, that's totally disturbing and heart-wrenching.
Now, we know the Taliban co-founder Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar has been holding talks with politicians in Kabul. How much do we know so far about these talks?
These talks and meetings have been continued, and at the same time, Hamid Karzai, Dr. Abdullah, they are all in Kabul now and talking with the Taliban from their different sides, from the Haqqani network, from the political office of the Taliban in Doha, and from other commanders and prominent leader of Taliban. The meetings continue, and as much as I get information from these meetings, they are discussing formation of a new government to control things. People are afraid, and their economy is already broken, and the situation is getting worse as every day passes, because if the banks are closed, if the mall and exchange market is closed, if the borders has no security, if there is no interaction between Afghanistan, the region, and the world, obviously Afghanistan will be collapsed in economic era. So these are all the concerns that being discussed in these negotiation and talks in meetings that being continued in different parts of Kabul, particularly Presidential Palace, house of former President Hamid Karzai, and at the same time home of Dr. Abdullah or his office. But I get reports that they cannot move anywhere and they have to talk with the Taliban, but we get information from their media offices that the talk has been very progressive and affirmative.
All right, Zmarilai Abbasin, live in Kabul. Thank you for joining us. And as more Afghans try to leave the country, neighboring countries are preparing for an increase in migrants. Some Afghans who worked for Western organizations are leaving for Europe, while along the Greek and Turkish borders, more barriers are being built to try and stem immigrants. Yolo Apdafid reports.
Starting a new life, these Afghans were met at a military airfield outside Madrid. Almost 150, including children, are in the first wave to be evacuated from the Afghan capital. The Spanish authorities are preparing for more. This camp could house 1,000, a field of tents waiting for a new generation of refugees, which earlier attracted some senior politicians who came to see the facilities for themselves.
Spanish hub, this European hub, organized to provide support and any help to our Afghan collaborators and refugees, represents the values and principles of the European Union.
In the UK, British Afghans are also trying to help their fellow nationals, many of whom are trying to escape what they fear will be persecution under Taliban control, especially those employed by or who had relatives working for the government or as interpreters for NATO forces.
We are trying here to do advocacy and lobbying on behalf of you in the UK as well as in the Western society.
New barriers are built along Turkey's border with Iran as well as the Greek border in western Turkey. Greek ministers were shown what they say is a new 40-kilometre fence and a surveillance system. The government's concerned that instability in Afghanistan will lead to an increase in migrants. In 2015, conflict in Syria brought almost 1 million migrants to Europe.
The Afghan crisis is creating new facts in the geopolitical sphere, and at the same time it's likely to create more migrants. We're a European country working inside the European Union, and decisions are made within this framework, but we can't wait passively for any possible impact.
Migration into Greece, Spain and Italy especially hasn't stopped. Arrivals in Greece have slowed significantly since 2016, when the EU agreed a deal with Turkey to stop people crossing the border in exchange for financial support. Because of that, 3.5 million Syrian refugees have remained in Turkey. But thousands in Afghanistan seem desperate to leave. Kabul's main airport is inundated as Afghans hope to be allowed to fly out. Yolo Abdavid, CGTN.
The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says they have operational contact with the Taliban because of the need to discuss how to facilitate the people trying to reach the airport in Kabul. But she maintains there are no political talks with the Taliban, nor is there any recognition of the Taliban yet. So what does this mean for the refugees and for the EU relations with the Taliban? Let's bring in Professor Michael Semple from the Senator George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace, Security and Justice, Queen's University in Belfast. Professor Semple, thank you for joining us. What's your understanding of the EU position on the Taliban?
The EU is absolutely clear that it has not recognized and has no imminent plans to recognize a Taliban regime in Kabul. However, it is absolutely correct that the EU has some appropriate working ties with the Taliban even before the takeover of Kabul for the organization of humanitarian assistance. There were some contacts with Taliban on the ground. I expect that for the moment that will continue. If anybody's wondering when EU states or the EU more generally will actually have diplomatic dealings with the Taliban or a diplomatic mission there, I think that is a very long road. The Taliban had a chance of pursuing a negotiated settlement with the support of international community. They gave up that chance. They chose to impose their rule by force that violates all international norms. And I think that the wait for recognition will be a very long one.
Now, the EU countries are faced with the need to evacuate those who worked for them in Afghanistan and Afghan refugees fleeing the situation at home. How is the EU likely to motivate member states to take in refugees, and how is this process likely to be organized?
Well, really, there are three stages to this. Many of the people who are getting on the flights, which you're watching on the pictures these days, are not even refugees. They are passport holders or indeed visa holders of the EU states. They're not refugees. They, if they get out safely, they will be able to live normally in the EU countries. Then there are contacts and people, Afghans, who worked with the EU, with member states during the 20 years in Afghanistan. They will have to be settled. Now, member states are taking responsibility for that. Ursula von der Leyen has made clear that there will be some funds made available centrally for member states to be accessed. In terms of the broader scheme of things and the kind of refugee movements that the EU has faced, the people coming out on the airlift, Afghans not holders of EU passports coming out in the airlift, they're relatively small numbers. It's going to be difficult at first. It can be handled. The far bigger question is the next wave. The next wave is potentially millions of people trying to get out of Afghanistan in the months or year or two ahead. Because as of last Sunday, we have to face the fact Afghanistan's a failed state again. Millions of Afghans are doubtful about their future in the country, and that's why you've seen the rapid movement to tighten border barriers in Greece. And I think that the attitude of the EU and member states is likely to be to try and stem that tide, but it's going to be an incredibly difficult task. Because how do you work with the Taliban regime? The Taliban, frankly, it was a very bad move by the Taliban to take over Kabul, even if they could. They have no ability to sustain this economy. Without a sustainable economy, and in the face of a very, very tough, heartless regime, millions of Afghans are going to try and get across the border, and many of those are going to try to head for Europe.
All right, Professor Michael Semple, thank you very much for those insights. A senior U.S. official says ISIL poses a potential threat in Afghanistan, forcing it to change its evacuation plans at Kabul airport. Let's take a look at the history of ISIL in Afghanistan.
Islamic State was first formed by Jordanian jihadists in 1999. But it didn't become a force to be reckoned with until 2014, when the group shocked the world with a stunning campaign of conquests over major cities in Iraq and later Syria. With significant territory under its control, Islamic State managed to generate billions of US dollars in revenue from oil fields and refineries, lucrative smuggling routes, extortion, robbery, and kidnapping. The group formed the Islamic State Khorasan Province, or ISKP, in Afghanistan in 2015, where it first started to extend its geographical reach beyond Iraq and Syria. ISKP concentrated most of its activities in eastern Afghanistan, particularly in Nangarhar Province, which borders the region of Pakistan. In late 2019, the group was almost eradicated from its main base by the US and Afghan militaries, and separately the Taliban. But a think tank based in the US estimates there are still over 2,000 members of the ISKP active in Afghanistan. In a UN report released this June, attacks claimed by or attributed to the ISKP have increased to 88 compared with 16 for the same period in 2020. The report says the group continues to target civilians in urban areas. U.S. officials have cautioned that ISKP remains a threat.
In Niger, at least 16 people have been killed in the southwestern village of Tim in the Tillaberi region. The attack by an unidentified gunman occurred during Friday prayers in an area that has become notorious for civilian massacres this year. Multiple ambushes have been reported in surrounding villages, orchestrated by fighters linked to the ISIL armed group. More than 11,000 people have been forced from their homes due to the unrest. Authorities say forces behind the wave of attacks operate freely despite strict government controls. The latest incident follows the killing of 37 civilians in a village in the same region earlier this month. To combat rising attacks, Niger has declared a state of emergency and closed markets suspected of supplying armed groups. Meanwhile, in neighboring Nigeria, at least 75 people have been kidnapped from a village in the northwestern part of the country. Witnesses from the village of Rini in Zamfara state said the kidnappers raided the area on more than 50 motorcycles. They are also reported to have looted from the residents during the attack. Security officials have confirmed the incident. However, more details are yet to be released. This is the latest in a trend of abductions that have plagued the West African nation. The crimes are often carried out for ransom, with dozens of school children targeted in the last few months. Officials in the U.S. state of Tennessee say at least 10 people have died in flash floods and dozens are missing. Severe flooding has hit northwest Humphreys County Saturday following record rainfall. Authorities say it's the worst flooding to hit the area in over 20 years. The Tennessee National Guard has been deployed to assist in evacuating residents. A state of emergency remains in effect for 4 counties in the state. Hurricane Grace has hit Mexico and killed at least 8 people. The storm made landfall for a second time near Tecolutla in the state of Veracruz on Saturday morning. It was a major Category 3 storm with winds of 200 kilometers per hour, causing severe flooding and mudslides. The Veracruz state government says streets have been turned into muddy rivers in the state capital, Jalapa. 7 people have died there and 1 more in the city of Poza Rica. A mother and 5 of her children were killed by a hillside that collapsed on their home. Grace weakened as it moved into the mountainous interior. Chinese weather authorities have issued orange alerts for rainstorms in multiple regions. Orange is the second in severity in a 4-tier system. Downpours are expected in parts in some 10 provinces, ranging from China's northeast to central and west. Central China's Henan province is expected to be most severely hit. Wang Mengjie reports from the Henan provincial capital, Zhengzhou.
The Ministry of Water Resources said the heavy rains are likely to result in floods in the Yellow River and the Huaihe River regions, with torrential rains expected in parts of Henan province. To cope with the heavy rainstorms forecast, the capital Zhengzhou, where I'm standing right now, has learned lessons from the floods that triggered by record rainfall in late July. According to a circular issued by the city's headquarters of flood prevention and drought control, residents living in flood heat zones and those living on the first floor of buildings in the urban area were requested to be evacuated. As you can see, behind me, some car owners have parked their cars on overpasses to avoid flood damage, and residents bought hammers in case they might be trapped in a car. Some even purchased kayaks after experiencing a meter-deep flood water. The city of Kaifeng, which is expected to see a heavy rainfall than other regions, activated the second-level emergency response for flood prevention. It also ordered the full suspension of construction and business operations. Local officials say all enterprises, tourist resorts and construction sites are ordered to shut down or halt operations from Sunday to Monday.
It's coming up to 20 minutes past the hour. You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up. Desperation on the rise in Haiti as thousands remain in need of urgent aid after earthquake. And South African police alarmed by rise in crime during lockdowns.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Desperation is on the rise in Haiti. A week after a devastating earthquake, more than 2,000 have died, more than 300 are missing, and thousands are homeless. Prime Minister Ariel Henry has vowed to improve the government's response, but people are taking matters into their own hands. Some have attacked aid trucks in several towns across the south of the nation. Jean Handi Tibet reports from Le Cay.
Right now, I am in the base of the Haitian Coast Guard in Le Cay. This is where a truck full of water and wood just delivered some aid that came from Port-au-Prince. And then the people came in here to take it and take it outside to the camp, to the victims. So as you can see, a lot of people, these people, they are considered the head of the neighborhood. It's like every neighborhood, they have the notable, they call them the notable, the people that are in charge. They come here, get the supplies by motorcycles, anyhow they can. They get some wood, some piece of wood, some water, and they're gonna take it to their neighborhood. They're gonna take it to the houses to fix the houses. Right now, we are near the sea at the Coast Guard base in Le Cay. This is how it's happening. So the truck just came here and delivered the wood and the water, and then the people, they came in here and take it outside.
Japan has been struggling to secure hospital beds as the Delta variant sends infections surging. The number of new cases in Tokyo and across the country hit records on Friday, and that's despite an expansion of emergency government measures. Mayu Yoshida has more.
Japan is facing its worst COVID-19 outbreak since the pandemic started a year and a half ago. Government officials now considering ramping up COVID-19 tests to contain the spread. Right now, majority of the country is under the 4th state of emergency, which is considered Japan's version of a soft lockdown. But successive virus emergencies has become less effective over time, and now we're seeing many restaurants and bars ignoring instructions this time to close early and to stop serving alcohol. The worsening situation is putting pressure on the economy, the government, and the medical system. About 80% of critical care beds at hospitals in Tokyo are occupied, and we're now starting to hear reports about patients dying at home because hospitals are too full to accept new patients. COVID-19 also having an impact on the Japanese economy. Toyota plans to cut 40% of its production worldwide in September because of computer chip shortages in its supply chain triggered by the virus spike in Southeast Asia. Meanwhile, a recent survey showed a majority of Japanese companies want Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga to be replaced because of public distrust. And the surge in cases comes just days from the start of the Paralympics. Although there are fewer athletes and officials traveling to Japan compared to the Olympics, the health situation is a lot worse. A record number of new cases, around 25,000, have been reported for a third straight day in Japan, and this is more than 10 times the daily count from what we saw in early July. Mai Yoshida, CGTN, Tokyo.
To South Africa, where 18 to 35-year-olds have officially joined the country's COVID-19 vaccine rollout program. The country's health department hopes the 18-year-plus cohort will help raise vaccination uptake rates, which have slowed down recently. In Cape Town, younger adults joined long snaking queues at vaccination centres, as CGTN's Travis Andrews reports.
They have been queuing since the crack of dawn. And now these young adults are set to join the over 10 million South Africans to get vaccinated. They form part of the 18 to 35-year-old age group that are now eligible to get vaccinated. And for many, this has been a long time coming.
I'm going to be one of the first people to get here because I think it's very important that we all get vaccinated and we get herd immunity as soon as possible. It'll stop, the deaths and the suffering that the community and the whole South Africa has been feeling.
So far, more than 184,000 South Africans aged between 18 and 35 have registered to be vaccinated. That number is climbing though, as more and more South Africans look to restart some sort of normality to daily life.
I think everyone's just super excited because in a way it's like life can to an extent go back to normal. Yeah, so they're all looking forward to doing it. Yeah, I was super excited about it because of recently, there's only been terrible news happening around the world and with family and whatever, so it was nice to hear some good news for a change.
The government hopes to vaccinate 70% of the population by the end of the year.
I think this is one of the best steps to open up for the younger people, because I believe that the younger people are currently the drivers of the new wave. We've seen more and more young people dying of COVID.
Now that all adult South Africans are eligible to be vaccinated, the key focus will be placed on achieving some sort of herd or population type immunity as quickly as possible. However, while there's been overwhelming interest, particularly by younger South Africans, in being inoculated, interest by older people in South Africa in the vaccine seems to be waning, and that continues to concern authorities. That's Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Meanwhile, South Africa has seen a double-digit increase in contact crime compared to a similar period last year. These are crimes such as sexual offences, murder, aggravated robberies and property-related crimes. And this was revealed in the South African Police Service latest crime statistics tracking criminal patterns in the country between April 1st to the end of June 2021. CGTN's Ulysses Jamila has more.
The crime stats paint quite a grim picture. The crime stats reflect the crimes that occurred when the country was placed under lockdown level 1, 2 and 3 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The vast majority of crime categories saw increases in the double digits, but the police ministry has quickly cautioned against panic. Police Minister Bheki Cele says it's not quite as bad as it seems. Cele says the figures for the quarter appear greatly inflated because of the state of lockdown in the country at the time of the last comparable quarter.
Ordinarily, this would have been catastrophic, but I assure the nation this is not the case. I repeat, we cannot compare the same period of this year and last year due to the skewed and abnormal crime trends caused by the different levels of lockdown, if we are to understand this crime picture that we are presenting to you today. It is important for us to give this particular context and adequate explanation up front to mitigate the shock and fears that may arise at this juncture.
Despite this, Contact crimes, even compared to the same period in 2019, before the lockdown came to exist, still document an increase.
Contact crimes such as murder, attempted murder, sexual offences, and all categories of assault registered 60.6% increase compared to the corresponding period of the previous financial year.
Tele says the most common areas that murders are committed in South Africa are on the street, in open fields, parking areas, and abandoned buildings. Women still bear the brunt of the crime in this country. More than 10,000 people were raped between April and June, with many of the victims raped at home.
A sample of 5,439 rape cases revealed that 3,766 of rape incidents took place at the home of the victim of the rapist. 487 rape cases were domestic violence related.
The minister stressed that law enforcement officials need to do more to ensure safety of everyone in the country, but also admitted that they have been dealing with challenges brought about by the pandemic.
The impact of COVID-19 has been hard on South African Police Service. The police service is bleeding members through attrition, and the virus has resulted in the inability to take in new police recruits for 2020 and 2021.
Tele also reported that almost 50 cash-in-transit heists were committed between April and June this year. Yulisa Njameda for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
While Cote d'Ivoire is fighting the Ebola virus, an outbreak of the bird flu has been detected near the commercial capital, Abidjan. The Minister of Fisheries and Livestock says at least 170,000 chickens have been slaughtered. Markets have been closed in affected areas. Authorities have also ordered sanitary measures in an effort to curb the outbreak. Cote d'Ivoire is not the only West African country dealing with a bird flu outbreak. Togo and Ghana culled thousands of chickens after cases were detected in June and July. Cases were also found this year in Niger, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Mauritania and Senegal. Coming up in business news, we take you to South Africa's Western Cape as enthusiasts flock in for the annual floral display.
It's taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues for taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Thousands of people in South Africa's Western Cape province have started flocking to the West Coast National Park to see the wildflowers that bloom there every year this time. For many, the opportunity to go outdoors and enjoy the country's natural beauty is the perfect respite from dealing with the pandemic.
Every year, at the end of South Africa's winter, as spring is about to be sprung, a dazzling natural phenomenon pops up on the country's west coast. An array of wild flowers of many different species puts on an impressive show, creating a spectacular natural carpet of brilliant rainbow colours. After years of drought in the Western Cape, conservationists are optimistic that the high rainfall of the past year promises a spectacular flower season throughout the months of August and September.
The rain varies from year to year, so the flowers respond according to the rains and how much rain we get and how much sun and so forth, the elements basically. So the flowers are very beautiful this year. They came up a bit later than we anticipated, but as we can see now that actually the flowers are coming out very beautiful and very large. There's no patches in between, they're all solid together.
So you can see the daisies around us are in full bloom. We were anticipating that they would come into full bloom late August, early September, but the surprise is that they're in full bloom already mid-August. So it's really an excellent time for people to visit the national park now and view the flowers.
Flower enthusiasts come from far and wide to catch a glimpse of the annual floral display, a unique experience which only happens for a few weeks every year.
This year, we've seen a great influx of different species of flowers that have bloomed. This is because we've had exceptionally good winter rains, and also the wind has been far less this year around this time than what it has in previous years, which has allowed the flowers to bloom in all their splendor that they've got at this present moment in time.
The last time I was here was about 8 years ago. It was beautiful, but I think this year they say it's going to be fantastic.
The flowers are the most beautiful flowers I've seen in a long time, and every day it's a different kaleidoscope of colors.
This time of the year is very special to us as employees who are working here, because then that's when the general public comes in, and then we need to be at our level best to make sure that they enjoy themselves, the places are ready for them to come to and enjoy the parks.
And after the flower season ends in a few weeks' time, visitors to the park will still be able to enjoy its rich biodiversity and scenic views all year round. Renat Alcom, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Obi Ononye is a 65-year-old Nigerian who has been a leather artisan for about 40 years. Senior citizens like Ononye who continue mastering their craft are now passing on their experience and grappling with unique socio-economic challenges. However, every August the 21st, they are celebrated and highlighted through the International Senior Citizens Day. CGTN's Alexandria Majala explains.
65-year-old Obiara Ononye works hard to counter any stereotype society may have about people that are his age and above. He's been a leather artisan since the late 70s and has no intention of retiring, especially because he built his business with his own hands and relied on word of mouth to promote it.
I started crafting leather in 1978, and mainly to make what I used or what I needed. Sandals, backpacks, sling bags, wallets. And then as I made them and used them, other people saw them and wanted me to make for them. And from one person to the other, I got a lot of referrals along the way.
Ononye markets a range of bags, wallets, pouches, and other leather accessories under his brand name Obi Leather. He attributes his 4 decades of staying power to unique design, the variety of products he offers, his dedicated use of high-end leather, and an uncompromising attention to detail. Some of his creations sell for about $2,440 each, and in time, he got some well-deserved international recognition. His luxury leather bags can be found on shelves in high-end stores across Nigeria, South America, and Europe. As the world celebrates and discusses issues affecting its senior citizens on August 21st, Ononye is encouraging both the young and elderly in Africa's most populous country not to ignore the economic opportunities and personal fulfillment that artisanal professions can provide.
Craft is like something most people fall back on. Maybe they would either want to learn it because they lost their job and they feel they could just make do with leather work. And for me, it's giving me the opportunity to do really what I've always wanted to do, which is like teaching.
World Bank data indicates that senior citizens like Ononye only account for 2.7% of Nigeria's 200 million people. The current president, Muhammadu Buhari, is 78. The unique challenges of people over 65 are arguably considerable, especially during the economic recessions and the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. In June, the Nigerian government inaugurated a governing board for the National Senior Citizens Center, following Buhari's signing of the National Senior Citizens Act, which directs that the elderly should be catered for through community-based systems. But Nigeria's population continues to climb relatively quickly, and the country has struggled through the years to honor its pension commitments. Ononye's strategy for enjoying this stage of his life is to stay in the moment and keep mastering his craft. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the review of 368 reserves for grazing across 25 states in the country. He gave the approval following recommendations of a committee headed by his Chief of Staff, Ibrahim Gambari. Tesem Akende tells us more from Jos in Nigeria.
Presidential spokesman Garba Shehu in a statement says the review will include data collection on grazing routes to assess levels of encroachment. The data is to be collated from states and the status of the grazing rights confirmed. Grazing reserves are areas set aside for the use of pastoralists and are intended to be for livestock development in Nigeria. The United Nations says for many years, cattle herders and farmers have been in conflicts over land rights in Nigeria. Amnesty International says more than 2,000 people were killed and 7,000 others displaced in 2018 alone in the dispute over land. President Muhammadu Buhari in June this year ordered a return of grazing rights awarded to herders in the 1960s as a way out of the situation. The directive has been criticized by various technocrats like climatologists who have recommended ranching as a better option. They say with ranching would come improved protein quality in beef, as the cows will be confined and given pasture and other requirements appropriately. Tesem Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
Smart hydroponics could soon help urban dwellers in Tanzania grow their own crops in small spaces at a very low cost. At the moment, most of the country's food is grown by smallholder farmers who are highly vulnerable to climate change because of their overdependence on rain-fed agriculture. CGTN's Isaac Lukando visited Tanzania's largest hydroponics farm and filed the following report.
This lettuce is growing on rows of plastic pipes that circulate water. Mwamvua Mlangwa, the largest hydroponics farmer in Tanzania, learnt about this soilless, eco-friendly farming method on a trip to Israel. She says the lack of knowledge on smart hydroponics for many in the country has made financing her 4-year-old vegetable farm difficult.
I tried to source funds from the existing banks. By the time they didn't know what I'm talking about, because there was nobody doing hydroponic in Tanzania, so I had to use my own funds.
Mwami grows her vegetables on half an acre of land using fertilizer that dissolves in water, which is then recycled. She says with the assistance of a mobile app, a small space can yield up to 500% more than ordinary farms, while reducing water usage by 90%.
There's some app which you can download to control the nutrients which are coming on the plants. So you can do that. When you see the nutrients are lower, once you are connected to the internet, that app can tell you that like, the nutrients are lower, then you can come and add the nutrients.
Although global adoption rates for hydroponics are on the rise, Mwami says the country's adoption rate is still very low. To remedy that, she has begun passing her knowledge on the subject to university students studying agriculture.
The United Nations projects that the global population will reach 10 billion people by 2050, with roughly 83 million people added to the world's population each year until then. With less farming land available, hydroponics might just be the way to meet the world's growing food needs.
Although food is sufficient, Tanzania's overdependence on rain-fed agriculture often leads to low, unreliable and inconsistent productivity in the agricultural sector. With the potential use of less farmland, the government is looking to use methods like hydroponics to boost productivity.
What are we getting? Productivity is not about how many hours we spend working, not just about farm implements. It's also about the area you use to farm and what we have harvested.
Mwami sells her produce to major hotels, supermarkets and restaurants in the country. She's hoping that this soilless method of farming will grow to become the norm for farmers and urban dwellers across Tanzania. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead. A Nigerian artist has unveiled the largest Benin bronze plaque ever made.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
A Nigerian artist has unveiled the largest Benin bronze plaque ever made. Called Ancient Benin, the bronze work depicts the culture and tradition of the Benin people. Deji Badmas has the rest of that story.
When the people of Benin come out to celebrate like this, it's usually for something very special. And that's what this event is all about. This huge bronze plaque is the reason for the celebration. Weighing 2 tons and made of full brass, it's the largest bronze artwork to come out of Benin, a city with a rich history of bronze work. It's the creation of this medical doctor turned artist, Lucas Okoro. He titles the work Ancient Benin.
There is this misconception, actually a dissociation of ancient Benin and actually the Benin bronzes from Benin people themselves. Benin people are not associated with the Benin bronzes. We're not even associated. The museums that house these bronzes actually created the concept of ancient Benin as a way of dissociating Benin people from those bronzes, because ancient Benin became some kind of archaeological discovery, like they went and dug out the bronzes like dinosaur fossils, which is not true. The bronzes, we're still been making them since today, even the same way.
The unveiling of the artwork comes against the background of the planned return of stolen Benin artifacts when British colonial forces invaded the ancient Benin kingdom in 1897. A number of European countries have committed to returning the stolen artifacts, some of which date back to over 200 years. Okoro says his work demonstrates that the artifacts are not just mere works of art, but a means of communication among the Benin people.
Our bronze plaques and our bronze works were a form of writing. So in 2019, I actually launched a petition to have the UK museums officially classify the Benin bronzes and the Benin plaques as hieroglyphs, which I feel is important because they were a form of writing.
And talking about hieroglyphs, Okoro says his work here tells the story of a great king of the ancient Benin Empire and some cultural practices of the people.
The story here simultaneously depicts two things. It depicts the true story of Abayari I, but it simultaneously is depicting the Benin traditional belief in reincarnation. So in our tradition, traditional and Benin culture believe in reincarnation, and we believe that, people have 7 lives and were reincarnated 7 to 9 times.
Okoro says he plans to give the artwork to the British Museum in appreciation of their acceptance to return the stolen Benin artifacts. Okoro's artwork has continued to attract attention, with many in Benin City coming to where his works are displayed to take a look at ancient Benin. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Benin City, Nigeria.
Coming up in sports, we will tell you the story of Egypt's most successful Paralympian who's headed for a 6th Paralympic Games.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you